All great fighters in history had this one unique characteristic inside of them. And when you try to put your finger on it, you don't know exactly how to map that thing out. But one thing's for sure, they all had it. When you think of the great fighters of old, like Jack Dempsey, the Manasseh Mauler, who would blow through your city and blow through your favorite fighter like it was nothing. And in the manner in which he did it, there was just something about him that you knew that the typical average human being doesn't have that characteristics. This is why people came to the arenas and he could fill a stadium. That trait that a fighter has isn't one of a regular average everyday person. And why is this trait so dominant in a fighter? Because see, this is almost like the animal Wolverine. It's a trait. It's not just in the DNA, but it's a characteristic that supersedes the human mind, the human body. They're typically, when you see them, they typically look like a machine. So did those guys like Jack Dempsey. And then came Sugar Ray Robinson, an offensive juggernaut. These characteristics of these individuals, they separated from the typical average human being by far. It wasn't close. That's why they are so captivating when you see them. And then as time continued to go on, there was the likes of Muhammad Ali, great blazing fighters who trailblazed. And when you watched them from the ground, you watched them from the sky. It did not matter how you looked at them. One thing you saw consistently is that unique trait. And that's exactly what we're going to get into when we talk about and break down the characteristics of this unique individual. Most people are not born with these genes, but lo and behold, we love to see them. And I'm going to make it very clear as we moved into the more modern era. For those of you who are at least 40 years old, you got to see the likes of Mike Tyson, the dynamo. When you saw him, you knew that there were not people that moved like that, were that explosive. And he, no matter what or who he was up against, he would fill an arena. And because that characteristic is something that we all see and that we all want to be a part of, we want to touch it, we want to see it. But what is it called? And that's what we're about to get into, because that trait continued to move forward through time. And then you got to see people who just had that flamboyance, like Sugar Ray Leonard. And here we go in this era. And we got fighters like Lomachenko, Tank Gervonta Davis. All of those guys have this unique quality. And I would even like to say Prince Nassim Hamed, who was electrifying. And there was this Hector Camacho, the macho man. He was totally flamboyant, but dynamic. And so this characteristic, as we break it down, thank you guys for taking the time to listen. But what we're going to do is really bring and shed light on this individual today. And so before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Coach Eric A. Bradley, coach that is. And for 4 decades, we teach boxing. And I was in the down line, or my up line, with several of the greatest coaches of all time. They're actually on the Mount Rushmore of coaching. They've literally written the book. So I had the honor of being in that down line and passing the knowledge that I've learned, being in a lot of different scenarios and having the opportunity to meet the world's greatest fighters ever. Hall of Famers, literally got to work in the camps. So what did I take from all of these things, all of these moments in act, and all of these inspirations? Well, what I do is I take the knowledge that I learned and I write it, and I make sure that I cultivate it and put it into a science, because there is nothing more scintillating than the science of boxing. So today what we're going to do is break down this actual style of fighter. And this style of fighter, my friend, has the dynamics of a jaguar, but as venomous as a poisonous snake and as aggressive as a gorilla in the mist. And this fighter, the characteristic of them is what we call the hybrid. And what does hybrid stand for? It's a morph between two elements or things merged together that have different characteristics to make one unique entity. And when you look at that, you see the behavior, you see the tools that they have. And one of the analogies I'd use is a Tesla is when you take a minivan and you put it with a Apple computer, and this is 1990, and you merge those together and you have a Tesla now. The home van, and now you got the computer, and now you got this system of a vehicle. And when you look at these athletes, this is exactly what they are. They have those unique abilities. Now, when I break down the hybrid fighter, what does that entail? First, they are aggressive in nature, but when you think about them, they have the wherewithal to understand how to camouflage their aggression, how to manifest defense, to be in the position they need to be. So their footwork is absolutely off the chart. And when you understand the science of boxing, you understand how I always talk about the periodic table. It's just like when you look at the iron chart. It's all of these different elements that make up great footwork, understanding ring generalship, and the hybrid fighter has those all. And when the hybrid fighter moves, they understand that they're moving not to just get away from you, but to set themselves up, because their defense isn't just typical defense. They're just not trying to make you miss and make you pay. They are trying to make you miss and make you their prey. They want to finish you. And that's one of the characteristics of one. If you go back and you look at Sugar Ray Robinson and Sugar Shane Mosley, Sugar Ray Leonard, when those guys would come out for the final round, they were not coming out to just survive the rest of the fight and walk away with their hands raised. They were trying to bludgeon you. They wanted you to be finished. And so that's not something that you choose to do. That's within you. When you watch some of these young athletes that appear to have that, and then you see them run through a test and you say, oh, that thing's not there like I thought it was. Well, that's what we call algorithm of a fighter. It means it's not by choice, it's by design. They were born that way. And when you start to think about the hybrid fighter, that's exactly what's so unique about them. But what gives them the ability to actually move and can press? They understand head movement. They understand how to press forward and come utilizing the front foot just to set up the angle, because they understand something about moving forward. There's an immediate danger, but they invite that danger. And what's so unique about the hybrid fighter is when they create pressure, they already know instinctively. That's what's so unique. They are intuitively aware of what could possibly happen. So I say they were born with that immediate defensively responsible DNA trait. And so it's like they're in the wild and they're just like these animals who could come up upon their prey and never pay. And so when you watch a Lomachenko or a Tank Davis, you see them very rarely get into a situation where they're in real trouble. They've been hurt, they've been dazed, they've been possibly even dropped. But one thing about them is they smell blood still, because they understand how to act like a fighter. They have that algorithm of a fighter. And when they press you, they understand how to break, because they understand the periodic table of boxing. And there is a such thing. When you look at the floor, we created a map years ago, decades ago, sorry, that showed you about every possible footwork scenario, or when we call ring generalship, every scenario that can position you in a place in the ring that could either put you in harm's way, or it could put you in a position to set a trap for your opposition. And I think I like to think of myself as someone who paints pictures. And when I educate the athletes that were under my tutelage, and now the coaches that come up under my tutelage, I like to think of myself as giving them weapons that no one else possesses, because there's a maniacal drive when it comes down to the time put into it and the natural ability that I was blessed to share that with, and how I paint that canvas. It's very complex, but we make it so simple. So those guys being able to use the ring forward, laterally, backwards, and if we have to, we take it in a circular motion, not just left or right, but we'll spin you. And that's a hybrid. They don't know when to turn off the offense, but they know how to turn it on